Okay, I wanted to start with a brief discussion of grades. All the midterms are graded, and including your bonus questions. Also, your group projects have been graded. So if I've written notes on that, please respond. And if there's something you don't understand, absolutely email me. And there's a way, sorry, my dog is right here, look. He got a very quick walk today, so he's not very happy, are you? Okay. One day we'll have everyone bring their animals to class. I love seeing what everybody has at home. So anyway, the grades are accumulative points only. It doesn't go by letter grade. So, you know, if you get an A and you get a 90, that's still 110 points less from 100. But with bonus points, you could actually get 105 on the midterm. So, you know, there's also going to be an opportunity for extra credit. I'll be posting those this week. So there will be some 50-point extra credit opportunities. One is by writing a third play report. So I'm going to look at those very carefully today so that you understand, and I want to see if you're doing that, you know, working by the rubric and that kind of stuff, so that you get all the points possible for that, because there's no tricks. It's just you know, points in, points add up to the end. So any questions on that? Feel free, or if you want to put something privately in the chat, I'll absolutely take a look at that too. And, or you can just, you know, hang out or meet me after class, or just, you know, if you want to Zoom. I've had several Zoom individual sessions. So if you feel like you need to get back on track, or you want a timeline, or you need an extension, please just communicate with me. That is the most important thing. I'm here for you. And like I said, this is the first time I've taught a fully online class. So my goal is to make it as robust as an in-person class. And that's, to me, that's very hard. At summer session 1, I signed up to do a class that I thought was going to be in person. It got canceled, so I signed up to do a second class. And I got on there and it was so boring, and the teacher was so boring I dropped it. So I don't want you to have that experience, because this is general ed and I would like you to enjoy it and have success and take it with you. I loved reading the headlines. I thought that, you know, some of you were just like so far and above what I expected, and they were fabulous. And others, I think, you know, it was probably a trying experience, but I feel that everyone did have an experience. And theater is a collaboration. So you're always relying on others, and that's a very hard thing, I think, in this day and age, with the use of cell phone, text, that tends to make you think you're connected, but you don't actually have to rely on that person necessarily. So in our field, you actually have to, and the world is made up of human contact. So I think it improves all of our general interactions with each person, even if it's the person at the grocery store, to do a collaborative project. So any questions or comments? Nothing? I'd love to hear from you guys. Okay, the first thing we're going to do today is work on the director section. So I will talk us through a PowerPoint. We have some great things to look at first, and maybe what we'll do, they're posted on your pages under directors for those of you who are not on the Zoom call, and we'll look at what Peter Brook says about directing. And let me just get ready to share my screen. Okay, are you seeing a person's figure in the center of the screen, or are you seeing a white screen?
A person's figure.
Okay, very good. Because it's difficult for me to tell when I go to screen share and I don't see the image that I'm expecting if I'm actually going to see the image. So we're just going to take a look at this interview with Peter Brook.
See their graffiti, their final prayers, and their last hopes to see the world change. What are you doing here?
I lost my job. There are no more heads to cut.
No more heads.
There are no more heads to cut.
No more heads to cut, a macabre prompt from the stalls. It's from Peter Brook, rehearsing a production based on an experience he had on his travels many years ago.
What are you going to do without a prison to look at?
It will still be there.
Brook says he met a criminal in Afghanistan whose unusual punishment was to sit outside his prison, contemplating it. He seems like a noble inmate. I think others might have thought, well, here's a chance for me to abscond, but that would rather ruin the story, wouldn't it?
No, that is, he isn't an inmate, he's an outmate. Either he feels deeply that he needs to go through something for his crime, or he says, that's enough for it. Okay, boys, I'm off. And of course, it's human. That temptation cannot fail to be there, but he has recognized it, and that is part of the vast inner struggle that he has to live with.
Is the famous theatre producer Peter Brook.
Once upon a time, Peter Brook was a familiar presence on the British cultural scene, ever willing to help out a struggling late-night current affairs show.
Various ways we found that playing a Yugoslav fiddle, in the end, sounded like a dog.
With his bent for the avant-garde and the experimental, it's no wonder he's revered in his adoptive France.
I think that the folly of all time for any of us living in Europe and in England is Brexit. It is something so narrow-minded, this old-fashioned thing that because we're an island, we mustn't have anything to do with those awful people in the continent, on the continent.
We're taking back control, that's the argument of those who...
Yes. But on the
we're
other
freeing
hand,
ourselves of the shackles of
that's
European
true,
regulation.
because all that is true, but the ideal that was at the beginning behind it, like the ideal of the United Nations, which alas hasn't lived up to it, but one can recognize the ideal and the ideal of Europe bit by bit coming together.
Where oxlips and the nodding violet grows.
People still talk of Brook's Midsummer Night's Dream on trapezes.
With a wonder you...
But lately he had his fellow directors rending their jodhpurs after he said middle-class theatre, as he put it, was deadly.
No, but I've left that ages ago. It's their business. It's not for me to, again, to criticize, rail against. That was 60 years ago. All I can tell you is that I like my friends. So simple as that. The whole of theatre is shared experience. An author who comes and gives you the play and then comes to the rehearsal, as in the old days, and saying, no, that's not my play, I say, fuck off.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Brook's productions have been a long way from the West End, with a progressive attitude to the canon and to casting. How well is theatre doing as a whole on this?
You can't trap me into generalizing. There are enough people doing that, and they're writing editorials and everything you want. But the fact that there are more and more women recognized in positions of power and authority is absolutely right. And this natural integrating of the sexes and at the same time of the races is something that I'm really happy. That's the one thing looking back over the years that I'm really happy to have been right at the beginning of.
At 93, Brook doesn't enjoy the titles conferred on other grand men and women of the theatre.
I mean, they leave me cold. It's like colonialism. I wouldn't want that, but I was awarded something that I was told is the greatest thing of all. Beyond that, Her Majesty made me Companion of Honor. My mind went back to the Knights of the Round Table, and I thought that I'm part of a little band of Her Majesty's Companions of Honor. We're all invited to a little meeting around her, of her close little circle. And to this day, years and years go by, but I'm still never invited.
I should think they'll be on the phone very shortly.
I hope so.
Peter, thank you very much.
The two most common reasons people go to see plastic surgeons.
Okay, so that was a man, 94, still not 93, I think, but he may be 94 now, still working. He revolutionized theater, as I mentioned in the page, which is that Midsummer Night's Dream set in a white room on trapezes, stripping everything away. And yet now he's looking back at it 60 years later as very, middle class, pedestrian. He's gone completely beyond, and yet still speaking of theater as a collaboration, as a way to discover I think he's looking for the meaning of life, and he continues to search every single time. Now, later on, we'll look at Julie Taymor, a very different example of someone searching for the universe, but both incredibly big powerhouses in their field. Let's just quickly go through the PowerPoint, and you can take a look at what I have to say. It's also in your pages, so you can look at that in greater depth when you're off screen. Let me find that for us.
Are undoubtedly wrinkles and laxity.
You need two screens. Let me just do this, I guess. Sorry, folks.
Otherwise known as sagging skin. But is surgery really?
I can't seem to get rid of this guy. Okay, there we go. That will help significantly because I can get out of full screen. Okay. Let's look at the director. I hope you're seeing the director slide up here.
Yes.
Okay, it's super great, you guys. Thank you so much for that. And let's see if I can go to a larger situation. Here we go. Okay, so the directors. Often there's only one director for a play. Sometimes there's two, same as in film. There can be more than one. Sometimes directors take different portions of it. But generally there would be one person that would be considered the director, and that's the person whose vision you will be seeing and who's sharing an idea with an audience. It's somewhat of a modern invention. Originally, the playwright or the actor or the theater manager just presented a play. They were more interested in ticket sales than in the art. People brought their costumes from home. You could wear whatever you want. If people paid more money, they got to sit on stage. If the playwright was well known, they got a better place. In Shakespeare's time, there were basically two main companies, both following different playwrights, Marlowe or Shakespeare, and then they had their own group of players that did that. The scripts were largely oral, different. The playwright was more the celebrity, but then also sometimes became an actor. With Duke George II of Saxe-Meiningen in 1866, we started getting what was a person acting as the first director. He created a central discipline by working with a group of a company of actors and unified the stage pictures with costume and settings so that the costumes were from the same period as the environment, or you weren't looking at 19th century furniture and Roman-esque costumes that were an idea of a toga or what people brought from home. So he felt like the image that the audience saw needed to be cohesive and also help discuss the story. He also developed ensemble acting. So instead of a company built around one main character, one main actor who sort of played the main character in every play, there was an ensemble or a family of characters, and the work was shared. And that also depends on your scripts, of course. The director as an artist, and this is an interesting thing we talked about briefly for when we discussed stage directions, which was, can the stage directions which are developed by the director be copyrighted? And there has to be a specific sort of creative originality to something in order for it to be copyrighted, particularly in a script. So there's significant law, I read some of it, and that is discussing whether or not this can be copyrighted. But after that law, the director's stage directions were no longer included in the play. So in the published plays, when you're looking at published plays from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you can actually see stage directions. And then after that point, they were no longer part of the copyright. So what does a director do? You know, they look for the meaning as a poetic vision. In our book, it talks about Eli Kazan looking for the spine of the play. What is the essential thing without which the story cannot stand up? They collaborate with other theater artists, looks to create a selected vision of life. So it's a mirror. It's slightly looking in a funhouse mirror so that you can identify, but you can't actually fall into it as much. And generally is the controlling artist responsible for unifying all the elements of scenery, from the producer to the actor, taking all the groups together and creating this whole that the audience will see. There's generally 3 types of directors, and we're going to discuss these. The one that has a directorial concept, where all the collaborators will buy into that vision and support that vision, and then bring representations of that to the discussion. The second one is the creative coordinator, which limits their vision. They have one, but they limit it, and then they sort of direct by committee, welcoming input from all, and willing to slightly suppress their own vision for another. And also then the guide, which this develops through rehearsal process. Maybe they have an idea, but they're waiting really for the collaboration of the rest of the group. And that's largely in the beginning in pre-production, that would be designers. And then in rehearsal process, that would be the actors. Sometimes you can even have your stage manager and others add to your work. Okay, why can't I get this to advance? So the director's looking at the play's potential. What is this play's potential? I think we skipped one. Yeah. So what is this play's potential? If I am a conceptual director and all the collaborators buy into this vision, I have an authentic idea for the meaning of the play. I've been working with this play. I've not only read it, I've dissected every word. I've put forth some scenarios in my mind, trying to figure out what is this play about? Because really we're always trying to answer, this story is about, and then insert universal truth. So what is it about? What are we really trying to find underneath these words? All artists work to reinforce this vision. That works through tearing it apart, through rehearsal process, and then restoring the meaning, finally, so that the audience is seeing a whole. And the director may have an experience that drives the concept forward. We just heard Peter Brook talk about that. He had an experience in the Middle East, and then that drove the concept forward for that specific play. The director motivates all others, everyone else that's in the process. You're excited to work with that director when they bring something like this vision to you, and you want to be a part of that. And then they incite others to fully develop this vision in 3 dimensions. So the actors are 3-dimensional, the scenic is 3-dimensional, The costumes are three-dimensional so that you're actually seeing not what you see on a movie, a flat screen, but you are in fact seeing an entire one composition on stage, living and breathing as you're experiencing it as an audience member. So also a potential director could be a creative coordinator. They have a specific vision, but they limit it in putting on the play. So they have an idea, they've done all the same amount of work. Every director should do the same amount of work before they get to the rehearsal process or to the design discussions, because they really are the one that drives the ship. They're the pilot, of the plane. They really have to have an idea or a direction. Otherwise, you're rudderless and you end up with a very muddy intent. And then the audience is unclear actually what they're supposed to get out of this production. So they allow direction by collaborative input. So if an actor has a specific thing, and remember now what we're talking about is published plays. We're not talking about something that is unpublished or a work in progress. Even if you're working with a new playwright and a brand new play, you would have, the actor would bring a question to the director, the playwright would come and the playwright would talk about intent. So you're not trying to change the words, you're trying to discover what the words are saying. So there's a difference between the two. Words can mean different things to different people. This can use the rehearsal to discover the meaning of the play, but never deviating from their particular meaning. And then trying to find it as just guiding the process. They do have this intense research into the play. They try to figure out what the play is about for them, but they're very willing to change through the rehearsal process. They can change direction. Maybe they thought they were going one way and something happens in a rehearsal that really speaks to each individual person, and they change direction for the intent of the play. And this again is, we're working with a published script, a script that is written. We're not changing the words. We're just wondering what the meaning is. And if you followed the discussion of the Second Amendment, all of that really hinges on exactly what the intent of the comma is in the Second Amendment. What does that mean? Where is the pause? What we're talking about before or after the comma. So, I mean, that's even just a grammatical point. When you're talking about something like words or a script, it can be really incredibly important. All collaborators, which mean all participants, have equal access to the director and equal access to input to try and decide, what are we going to do here? So if you're not working with a script, but you're working with an idea, let's say you're doing a reimagination of the Oresteia. So you want to, I worked on one like this is why I'm bringing it up. They wanted to do a reimagination of Agamemnon, but from Electra's point of view. So there was a trilogy of 3 plays, but they were refashioned or redevised from the point of view of a different character than the title character. So you're not exactly using a script, you're using an idea. Everyone has immersed themselves in the original material, whether it is a script, a story, a fragment, an idea, an experience, and then the script is written as rehearsals progress. So you are trying things out, you're doing some improvisation, you're working through storyline, but then the script is written, and once it is set, then performances are consistent and they're not improvised. The improvisation is through the process of discovering and developing the ideas and then finding the exact words that work. In the final rehearsals, the script is written and the stage manager will be following that and then truly looking to see if this is the meaning that we're intending in the words. So they're very, very carefully controlled. It's not just a free-for-all. And what is the process of the director? And that depends on the production company. So Sometimes they have a part in play selection. At Santa Barbara Theater Group, the director has a part of the play selection. Sometimes you're in a repertory theater, a rep. They have a season, and the season might be 5 plays. They may have selected the plays sometimes 2 or 3 years in advance, and the director has not been selected yet. Sometimes a play is a producer's idea. If you're doing not a season of plays, but you just have a company that does plays periodically, that may be reliant on a producer's idea of what play they're going to do. Sometimes a group, decides that they're only going to do new musicals, and then they'll work on those. And then when you see the next one coming up in the slot, or you look down a year, you try and find a director that's best suited for that particular play. So it can be both things. It can be the director selects the play, or the director is selected to work on a particular play. So at Rubicon Theater, which is an equity theater in Ventura, the producers decide the season, and after the season, and they consider the season with directors in mind, but then the offers are put out for directors, and the director accepts based on their understanding of working with that particular company, and also whether they feel like they have something to bring to that particular play selection. The director can be involved in casting and then in conferences for both marketing and design. Let's talk about these things a little bit more. So selecting or creating script, if you're working devised method, then generally you're working with a small group of people in a company that you have safety with. You're willing to try out your ideas. You can feel vulnerable. You can shift and backpedal and make mistakes and not worry about it. Selecting a script often for a repertory company means how marketable is it? Can we sell tickets? How much money can we make? Can we make back at least our cost? Can we make back a little more than our cost if we have investors? And for something like Santa Barbara Theater Group, really Santa Barbara City College works as the producer. We are always very mindful of the fact that we are part of an educational process. Our theater is located on the grounds or the campus of an academic educational facility. And it is a place where all students can have access to being part of a theater company, either backstage or on stage. Every single person in our community can audition because we are a community college. And then once they are cast, they become part of our college as a student. The director decides and thinks about what is the interpretation of the text. Now, we use this word text, which means the script. It really goes down to the elemental portion of the script. What are the words saying? How can I really untangle these words to have some meaning for today's audience? So if we're working with an ancient text like Oedipus, we want to see where does that speak to our heart as a contemporary human. Holding auditions is something that the director can be part of. Sometimes the director, as I told you before, I worked with a director who was in London. So the auditions were here in the US. She had some ideas about who could be cast, but the casting of the actors was primarily with the producer and the casting agents. Everyone was put on tape. The tapes were sent to the director. The director could weigh in, but in the end, the persons with the money, the producers, were the ones that were making the decision. And again, that depends on your company, because if you're with Santa Barbara Theater Group, you can be holding auditions here on campus, and you would open that up to the wider community. An email goes out, it's publicized that auditions are happening, and the director is largely involved, and the president of the college doesn't care because he has far too much to do than to come to an audition, which can take hours and hours. They're generally scheduled by time. So we can have initial auditions, which are 5 minutes. You get a 5-minute slot to tell us what you are about. And then with a callback, the director has a chance to really try that character onto the actor and really seriously consider, is this the right actor for the role? can this actor embody the character? Can I get this actor to move towards the character? Because in an audition, it's very raw, it's very new, it's not rehearsed. And what you're really trying to do is say, is there potential there to get this actor to the character? And sometimes there's even ensemble callbacks. So ensemble callbacks would be those which you would work multiple characters together to create a cast. And that is matching an actor to a role and matching the complete ensemble for the best representation of the family of characters. The process continues. The design conferences may have begun, in the case of opera, years in advance. In the case of most companies, they can begin a year in advance, 1 year in advance, 6 months in advance, so that you have time as a designer to process what the director is thinking of, and to really thoroughly do your research on vision and concept and image and, I don't know, textural impulse, visceral impulse. What kinds of things speak to you with what the play has said to you as a designer, and what the director is saying to you as the interpretation of the play. There's many discussions to discover a visual metaphor, perhaps something everyone can hang together on in terms of what this play means or what this play is about. The designers bring ideas. So scenic brings ideas for the environment. Sometimes that's completely surrounding the audience. Sometimes that's in a proscenium, so it's a picture frame in front of the audience. The costume designer brings ideas also for the environment, but through the three-dimensional building up of a character. How is the character going to move through the space of the environment that you're working with the scenic designer to try and develop? What kind of color impulse do you want to see moving through the space? Does each character have an individual color, and what is the biggest statement? For example, in the Peter Brook, the absence of color, and with a primarily white background, white stage, when color was introduced, it was very, very punctuated and like putting an exclamation point on that particular moment. And then sound can be incredibly important, both to create environmental sound and sound reinforcement. Lighting and projection then generally can be simultaneous. It can be at any time in the process. Sometimes the director sees something through projection before they see something in any other way. And right now we're in a time period where directors are liking to use projection as a major element of the environment. The set designer will provide a ground plan, and this will configure the physical space. It defines the space. If you cut a wall at 3 feet above the floor and look at it from the top or bird's eye view, it will show the scenery and the larger props. So this is a ground plan. As you can see, it says set design for Plaza Suite. So each of these lines indicates something different. This is the cyclorama, which is a surround screen. It can be hard or soft to give an end point to our set. These are walls or flats. You can see these lighter weight lines indicating a perimeter or a hard surface, which is vertical. Again, remember you're looking, just from a top viewpoint. So you're seeing things like a window, how it opens, a cabinet and how the door opens, a window through which you can look with a vanity in front of it, a closet, table, bed. So you can see there's a wall down the middle. On this side, we have the bed and bathroom. And on this side, we have a sofa, coffee table. So the major elements are here. The scenic design, also the theater is indicated with the proscenium. This is considered a footlight. That might be in the floor, not something setting up from the floor. Notice on this, we have absolutely no indication of elevation, so we don't know how high up this sofa is, how high up this wall is. Really what we're doing is just giving the director a way to look at entrances and exits. Here could be an entrance. Here could be an entrance. Here can be an entrance. They could go in and out of a window, and where they can sit. on a chair, on a bed, on a chest, on a sofa, on a coffee table, on a chair. And really, nothing should be there that isn't absolutely necessary to tell the story. Looking at this ground plan, you can tell that it's a comedy because the ground plan itself is kind of complex and has a little bit of chaoticness to it, in that there's a lot of things that are moving around or could move around in that space. Does everybody see that? Who's on the director's team? In addition to the designers and the support, the other collaborators, the director works specifically with an assistant director, and the assistant director can coach actors, can provide for extra rehearsal, like line rehearsals, so that actors can get their lines memorized or they need to get them up to speed, attends production meetings and takes notes. It's always better to have 2 ears listen to things, so that if a designer is saying something and the director's thinking about something else, that the notes are taken, so that in rehearsal, the assistant director can clarify perhaps something about, what is this sofa? Is it a hard sofa? Is it something they can walk on? Is it something that they bounce up and down on, or how is it? So those are some details that the assistant director can take care of. And then the stage manager also goes through the rehearsals with the director. They pull rehearsal props. They schedule the rehearsals. They ensure attendance at rehearsals. If people are late, they call them. They create a rehearsal log or a rehearsal report so that each of the members of the team can stay in contact, and they send that out at the end of every rehearsal, so that, for example, the designers know what was covered in the rehearsal. They know who was there. If there's something that was needed that they've discovered in rehearsal, they'll put it down. Oh, Bob needs a handkerchief, or let's consider an umbrella for this scene. They also compile a prompt book, which is a very elaborate script using the text of the play with enough room around it so that it can include all the directorial blocking and notes. We're going to talk about that in a second. All the cues, so they will call lighting cues, sound cues, deck shifts. This means if they're moving furniture on or off, if there's changing something in between act and scene. So they also will set all actor calls, time frame for rehearsal, and they will facilitate a fitting schedule. Because the stage manager sees the actor on a daily basis, costumes can contact the stage manager. They can give them what times they would be most convenient for the fittings and schedule fittings for the costume area. That's by far the most efficient way. A way that a lot of companies work is then the costume designer or the costume supervisor has to call every actor and try and make an arrangement, and then you have to clear it with stage manager, so that's a lot of going back and forth. It's best if the stage manager facilitates the fittings. Part of the rest of their team would be a voice and dialect coach. So this is a coach specifically voiced to work with diction and volume so that the words can be understood most clearly. And depending on the space that you're in, this can make a huge difference. If you're in a small space, pretty much everyone can understand you. This is actually something we're really talking about now. If we have to use face shields or masks for acting, then this really impacts both diction and volume, so that the words would have to be very clearly enunciated. A dialect coach works with accent. If you're making a play in a specific region and you want to reflect that region with an accent, then the dialect coach will research that, provide tapes, and listen to the actors as they use the language and make sure that they're in the appropriate accent. Sometimes that is the same person, the voice and dialect coach. There's generally a movement and or fight coordinator. So movement can just be to assist the actor's fluidity, or maybe the director wants to create a particular stage picture and go from that into a moment of the play and use it as a transitional piece in between each of the act and scene. And also for safety, if there's any kind of combat on stage, or if there's the use of a weapon, if there's something, if someone needs to fall down the stairs, fall out a window, we've had all of these things happen, fall down a basement. We've had live fire where they had to have things out. You have to have a fight coordinator, make sure that everything's going to happen in a very safe manner. And those rehearsals are scheduled before every single performance in half speed so that you can make sure that the movement is very clear and the movement is necessary and safe. A dramaturg is part of the director's team, and the reason why we're talking about these things is these will be all pieces that we're going to work with Tempest. We'll have a director, a dramaturg, designer, other kinds of things. So a dramaturg really holds the knowledge and the history of the play. They research the play. They research the time period in which the play was written. They research the social context of the play as it was written and wonder and try and figure out how that relates to the contemporary time. How does this play work for our audience? What was the intent of the play when it was written for the audience for which it was written? And how does that translate to the play being performed now for our contemporary audience? And maybe that has to change. Maybe that is no longer viable, and the director is creating a wholly new and original piece. So the dramaturg is really there as the local and specific holder of the history of the play and of the text and the words. They also look at difficult language, unfamiliar words, and try to define them, both as they were used in the original text and then using that word today to create a meaning for a contemporary audience. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Ashley. The staging, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next slide too. So the director's vision, there's a couple ways they can do it. They can translate the playwright's ideas verbatim. This is how we're going to do it. And you know, we've had a couple of movies do this recently, like Psycho. I am remaking, that was Darabont, I think. I'm remaking Hitchcock's Psycho beat for beat exactly as they did it. Not nearly as successful as the original because, again, you're translating somebody's ideas instead of making it wholly and specifically your own. Sometimes the director takes this controlling idea, image or sound, to define a production and then tries to make the production wrap around that idea. So, okay, of course, I'm not actually trying to say one is better than the other, but personally, I think creating the new original work of art is by far the best. It's going to be the most vital. It's going to keep it from being the museum piece of the playwright idea or trying to bend the play to fit some idea you have in your mind. Instead, let's go with what's there. Let's try and just create a new, robust interpretation, a new way of looking at these words. How can they be vital? Why are we doing this play at this time for this audience? That's the first question I ask the director. Why this play for this audience in this time frame? And that's one way you can get to a whole new and original work of art. You can be pre-planned. The early rehearsals can use to block the play, and blocking is characters' movements planned out from the ground plan, where they do exits and entrance. They're going to move from point A to point B. Okay, Bob, you enter here, you go to the chair, you go to the couch, you go to here. And I have seen directors work this way. It seems very mechanical, but be extremely successful so that when they get to the rehearsal, they know exactly the picture that they're going to go with, and they can focus completely on the intent of the character. The actor can memorialize those things into their body, and they no longer have to think about it. They can say, why am I moving here? and come up with their own motivation for that. And the director sometimes usually has a very specific reason why they're calling for that particular movement. But then you can forget about it, and then you can think about the words. So, there's a lot of ways to create a very successful production. Very collaborative ways to use the rehearsal to develop movement. Just try going over to the chair. Maybe you'd like to go over and greet, Sarah at that time. Are you going to hug her? Are you going to recoil away from her? Are you trying to avoid seeing her? Are you not really looking at the other character? Are you really listening to the other character? So you can use rehearsal to develop a kind of a natural movement. You can discover a rhythm. Sometimes you want to speed things up. Sometimes you want to slow things down. Sometimes you want to create anticipation for the audience by elongating a particular moment and waiting to punctuate it at just a specific person's entrance or a particular movement like sitting down or standing up. You want to discover the unity of the piece, always going back to that spine, the core meaning of the play, and the meaning of the production. And you're not going to put that in the program and say, this is what this play is about. You hope that the audience will actually discover it as the play unfolds in front of them. And primarily the director's helping the actor find the character's inner life and convey that to the audience. Here's some terminology very common for the directors that we use. And it is from the actor's point of view. So the actor is standing here looking at the audience, and here's the audience. So this is downstage left. From the audience point of view, it looks like downstage right. But this is called down left, down center, down right. Center stage, there's absolutely no discussion. Center from whether it's the actor's point of view or the audience point of view. But when the director is giving specific movement comments to the actor, they'll say, please move from upstage right to center and then downstage right to that chair. So you put this grid on top of the ground plan, and then the director can easily be more than just a traffic cop, but it needs to make sure that people aren't going to, cross and center, and there's going to be a big group of people, and suddenly the ship is all dragging to the right. I've seen plays where suddenly it's like everyone's ending up right here. What's happening on all the rest of the stage? So the idea is if you're using this entire stage, you want to tell the entire story through the use of the entire stage. That's why you're in that specific space. So we're going to look at a couple of directors as auteur. This means the director is truly the kingmaker, and we've heard that I'm the king of the world from the Titanic director, James Cameron, and also did a very, very interesting piece in Avatar. But Julie Taymor is well known. She is the director of Lion King and Spider-Man. She started as a costume mask maker, studied in Bali. We're going to take a look at a TED Talk with her. She really has her vision so strongly in every single piece of it that she controls the look, the script, the music, how it feels to an audience. And it's a very, very strong visionary thing that everyone supports. Martha Clark is also another one as an auteur. She connects imagistic fragments into a total work. So think about this more like creating a mosaic or a stained glass window, taking all kinds of different fragments of pieces to then put them together, and the collection becomes greater. The sum is greater than the total of the individual parts. And that creates meaning. And Pina Bausch, her company tours, you can see it. It's often on the UCSB Arts and Lectures tours at UCLA. Many major institutions have arts and lecture tours where they bring in special artists, and Pina Bausch has been one of those people. And really super interesting things that are dance theater spectacles, where they may actually even work with a piece of fabric to create a different shape around a body to have the audience look at the human body in a completely obscured way, so that you're not seeing the body, or seeing the shape that the body's making in conjunction with this piece of cloth. So she's working on spectacle, and the story is all about the invention of humanity and where they are in space and what are we doing in this time frame. So there's a pretty great work of art in just trying to figure out who we are as man. And I think that's one of the biggest things with theater. I think this is the last slide. Yeah. So one of the biggest things with theater is trying to figure out who we are, where we are, what are we doing, and why are we doing it. So I think that's a really important part of theater, and how we're going to try to exist in this world with theater. So we're going to look at Julie Taymor, and I'll set that up. It's a really cool YouTube video, and you can see some of the most important parts. And when we look at the designer's work, we'll be looking at the making of Lion King, where you'll see some of the incredible costumes, masks, and scenic elements, and why those were so important. Okay, and let me look at William's chat. William, so everybody was led into the meeting, and we started at about 6 minutes after 9. I checked back a couple of times. So did everyone come in from the Zoom link that was on our Canvas site? That's how I opened it. And how did you get in, William? I think that just means you needed to be admit, but you got here. So did you put in a password? Huh, okay, so yeah, that's because the college has required us to pre-screen everyone that comes in, instead of just providing a password for everybody. So, all right, let's take our break. And if anybody would like to stay and talk about the Zoom, I'm happy to do that now. But otherwise, feel free to go ahead and take your break. We'll be back at about 10 after 10, and we're going to watch the Julie Taymor, and we'll talk about Tempest. Okay, so feel free to stay, and we can have discussion, but really this is your break time, so I'll talk with William about getting in. I'm going to just pause the recording. Okay, one of the first things you can do is look at the Julie Taymor TED Talk. I've embedded it onto the pages of the director section, presentation number 3. So you really do want to take a look at that. You can take a look at what she says about being a director, about being a creator, what inspired her. An event that inspired her was something that happened when she was much, much younger, and she's taken that with her. When you think about the mirrors reflecting in the moon on that island in Bali, you will look at parts of Lion King, and we'll talk about that later when we talk about design. And you'll see how she's reincorporated different kinds of things. Even in Spider-Man, you'll see how she reincorporates it. She uses mask as a character gesture. In other words, she really finds that iconic character expression, and it sculpts that into a mask, generally much larger than life. And then the actor wears it, and it becomes animated as the actor can move around. She's done that for Spider-Man, which is a comic book, but for Lion King also, and a lot of her work is with mask. Take a particular look at her Tempest portion, and that can inform you when we go through the Tempest. That film is available, as are many films available actually about the Tempest, even for free on your particular, in the internet. So take a look there. I'm going to stop this recording and then we're going to start a new one for The Tempest.